So I'm Josh Kirschmeyer, the Platform Services Manager at Raytheon, and this is...
So I'm Garrett Klock. I'm a platform architect and an operator.
So we're here to talk to you about our journey and how we built a compliant service around PCF.
So you missed something. So Boom Sauce is in the title. So that started back when we had our initial dojo. So that was something that we actually adopted from Winston Rast, if anyone's worked with them. If you had something that went well, Winston would go and just say Boom Sauce. We had a lot of challenges when we kicked it off, so we kind of adopted that inside of our group. So when something goes well, we'll say Boom Sauce.
Right, and then when we wanted to really learn more about what Boom Sauce really is, we looked it up on Urban Dictionary, the most reliable dictionary there is. And it's defined as the highest possible degree of amazing and perfection, 1 billion times stronger than awesome sauce. So feel free to use the hashtag as you want. So before we get started, we just need to give you the disclaimer of any kind of sensitive or company-specific information that we weren't allowed to share with you is not part of our presentation, and that compliance is a journey, not a destination. And each company has a lot of overlap, but each company is unique. So hopefully you will be able to find some of this information valuable in your journey. So as Garrett mentioned, we work at Raytheon, and it's a global company focused on defense, civil government, and cybersecurity solutions. And we have been in business for almost 100 years, doing business in over 80 countries, and setting up a global presence to make the world a safer place. So like many of you guys, we're also on a digital transformation journey. And on the slides here are really a couple representations of our journey across the company. And Garrett and I are going to talk about our approach and how we're building a PCF service. But a couple of those links there are talking about how our IaaS business is partnering with Pivotal through the Partner Ready program, and also working with Pivotal Labs to help. I'm too close now. to help accelerate how the DoD develops software. And in the middle is a link that is around our CIO, Kevin Neifert, talking about how we are transforming internal IT and focusing on providing business value back to the business. We're focused on reducing risk, expanding margins, and growing the business. And through those actions, we're looking to transform how we do business and how we compete. And on the bottom are 2 examples of IT architects that have presented about how we're using technology through that transformation at PegaWorld and at last year's Spring One platform. So with our focus on business value, it really is breaking the model at Raytheon, where we have been in business for 96 years, and we have really the waterfall model and the traditional IT approach. And that's where DevOps come in and the agile mindset. And this is a representation of our approach leveraging pipelines, tool chains, and platforms. And the pipelines are really represented on the top there around iterating through the process, having tight feedback, and incorporating that into our work. The bottom is around the tools that we're using and the tools that are recommended to enable that transformation and that speed. So as I mentioned, we've been in business for 96 years. There's lots of legacy. So we need to create a service here that is not just focused on the greenfield applications and new development, but also all the brownfield application, all the legacy applications that we need to continue to support and to modernize over time. And that's really where the PCF as a service concept is working at Raytheon, where we are not treating PCF as a product itself, but as a service and something that can provide value back to our customers. And on the right here are a couple of screenshots from Keith Rodwell's presentation last year at Spring One platform, where he talks about, from a compliance standpoint, how to define your scope and articulate that back. And that really applies to our service here as well, where we are taking an MVP approach We're going to define the initial service that we're going to create, and then we're going to take the feedback back from our customers, whether those are developers or end users, and work that into our product over time. So we're going to take that iterative approach, and we're going to build our service to make sure it is aligned and providing business value as needed. So an important part to the service that we're defining here is the service tenets, and that's what we want our service to be. That's what it's going to provide. Those are our posts that are going to align us. And for us, it really is around achieving that compliance and security requirements. As the Air Force mentioned in some of the keynote yesterday, they were talking about ATO. We have a similar ATO process. We have controls that we have to meet. And if we don't meet that, then we're not really going to have a service. We can't offer this back to anyone. So that's a key tenet for us. The other area is around enabling speed and agility for our development and operations teams so that we can provide that business value quicker. And then finally, we need to continue to make sure that our applications have high availability and are resilient so that our customers can continue to do their jobs based on those applications. Now, when we're talking about the service, Agile usually means from the software development area, but we're taking that approach to the service that we're building as well, where we have the MVP approach for our service. This is what we're going to offer, and this is how we're going to operate it, and this is how we're going to build that service. But we're really focused just on right now, and then over time we're going to iterate that, and we're going to change that depending on the needs of our customers. So initially we're focused on really PCF with PaaS, but over time if we have demand or we need PKS or we need to bring in a function service or bring in different service brokers, we're going to do that as the demand comes in and adapt to our service over that time. And one concept that we have really used to drive that is the roadmap. So we set up our service, here's what it initially offers, here's our initial 6-month, 3-month, 1-year roadmap, but please give us the feedback on if that is going to make your needs better, if that's going to fit what you need, or if it's not, please let us know what we're not providing and we can bring that in. So kind of building on our service is the service model that we have, which is really our one-stop shop that is talking about everything regarding the service. It contains your tenets, your strategy, your responsibilities, how the service is operated, how we plan to deploy and scale that platform over time, the standard services and capabilities. This is where the roadmap is. This is where you can show it to people and they can provide that feedback based on that. Now, always an important part to any service really is the cost model or the chargeback. What's it going to cost? That's usually what some of the initial questions that we get when we talk to some of our customers about it. And this white paper from Pivotal does a good job of how different companies have developed chargebacks and showback models using PCF. And that's where our recommendation really is wait as long as you can to develop that cost model, because you don't want to prevent people from moving to the platform or stifling adoption because of that cost. Now that's easier said than done sometimes, and one of the key components there is to make sure that you have executive support in your organization that is going to support the development and the creation of this service and these platforms, because it's not free. And you need to cover those costs initially to drive for that adoption until the development teams and the operations teams and the customers can see the benefits that the platform brings, and then incorporate the cost model at a later point. So overall, we see PCF as a component through our journey, and it really is, as that catalyst in the middle is depicting, our catalyst through our digital transformation. It's accelerating us through the transition state, getting us to our desired state at a quicker pace. The tenets that we care about are around developer productivity. We want to change requesting a new environment from weeks to months to days, to hours and days. We want to make it so that our operators can have a greater ratio between developers and operators. They can do more through automation than through manual server building. We need to continue to offer high availability for our services. And most importantly, we need to achieve our security and compliance. Those are our value propositions for the service that we're building here. Now on the bottom, you'll see some haikus, and I'm sure everyone's seen ANSI's haikus about developer and operations efficiencies through PCF. So we had some fun, and I should really say Garrett had some fun coming up with some haikus that were important to us, and that's really around customers and compliance. So we're gonna say them.
If you want, you can go and say the part you know, the I don't care.
So here's what I need.
Provide me business value. I do not care how.
And from a compliance area, here
Here
are
are
policies.
policies. Go and make me compliant. I do not care how.
All right, Garrett's going to talk some more about compliance.
All right, so a lot of people will go and say, why can't we just use what PCF has out of the box? Why do we have to go and put things that might be seen as roadblocks, hurdles to overcome? And why do we do this? Well, one reason, as we just said, is our users expect it from us. But really, why do we do compliance overall? From the Raytheon perspective, we do it because, among other things, we make stuff that supports our warfighters. We go and protect nations, we safeguard users. Our goal is to make the world a safer place. So you can see some of our businesses up there. You've probably heard of some of our products: Iron Dome, Patriot Missile, MALD, DDG 1000. The list goes on. In order to do those things, we need to keep that information safe and comply with the regulations, the policies, and things of that nature. So of course, other industries are going to have other regulations and policies they need to adhere to. But what we're going to focus on is, as an aerospace and defense industry, what we need to focus on. These are the big ones for us. So there's ITAR, EAR, CUI, and then the DFARS controls under NIST. For those not familiar, ITAR is dealing with like the export and the import of defense-related items. This could be source code, this can be actual items themselves, it can be services, training, things along those lines. EAR is the portion that's similar to that, but it's talking about those items for commercial purposes that could have defense applications. So these are computers, aircraft, electronics. The CUI piece is because we're going to have some unclassified information that still is very important. It's going to need to be going protected from public disclosure. It could be something along the lines of proprietary information. And then the NIST items go into a little more detail about how that relates to DFARS. So as a defense contractor, we need to ensure that any sensitive federal information that we have, when it remains in our custody on a non-federal information system, we need to keep it confidential and secure. So that's basically the gist behind what DFARS is going to get at. There's two main documents that kind of paint the picture for this. And those are the 853 and 800-171. So they have these families of controls that they both are going to tell you how to address. 171 talks about the cybersecurity requirements, and 53 is going to talk about the information systems and the organizations and how you achieve that. The context of our talk also goes beyond just this, but it's within the bounds of AWS GovCloud. For those not familiar with GovCloud, it's the AWS offering that is for the purposes of government contractors. There's other flavors out there for different industries, but we leverage GovCloud, and that's how we're going to go and kind of talk about the other pieces within that mindset. You'll see here there's only 3 items that are bolded right there, and that's for a handful of reasons. So those are the ones I'm going to talk about, that's the bolding, but also Pivotal addresses some of the other pieces just out of the box, so we get some lift from that. Additionally, Raytheon has like a fabric that we've put on top of the GovCloud to go and address some of the pieces we need. We're not going to go into details about that, but suffice it to say, it helps us get some more lift. And we only have 30 minutes and eating into that right now. So those main areas were the encryption, multi-factor auth, and then the risk assessment pieces. So the encryption is going to talk about like how we have to go and process and store the information and ensure that it's put in an area where it is encrypted. And talking about that as data at rest, data in motion, and data in use. The multi-factor auth pieces kind of deal with the local and network access for the privileged accounts, and then it's going to be more for the network access to the non-privileged accounts. Vulnerability scans are going to be the piece that's kind of building up the risk assessment and the process that we built around that to go and remediate that and go and kind of be proactive around that. Part of this also is as you introduce automation into it, it really changes how you have to rethink your change management process itself, considering these other aspects. Now, our title slide talked about limited connectivity. So that might be something that you've already dealt with, and maybe something you're not familiar with. It's kind of easier to say what it's not to start with. So this is not something you're necessarily going to be able to go just pull your Docker image from the public registry. You're not going to be able to go to GitHub to go and pull your pipeline directly from there either. And the same with, you're not going to be able to go to PivNet and just pull a release and use it. So these could be air-gapped. They can also just be restricted proxy environments. In one of our environments, leveraging the restricted proxy approach, we ran into many issues in trying to go and reach what we needed. This was when we did our initial dojo, and part of that was Concourse just didn't have the ability to go and push the certs and proxies down to the workers in the runtime VMs. So we had to go and put into different additional measures to address for that. And then, as I made mention, we do have that additional control on top of the GovCloud, which does give us lift, but it did also kind of hamstring us in some other areas. It's not to say that there aren't things that you can do that are always difficult. There's going to be aspects that are pretty easy to go and leverage. When you go and use the internal Bosh for the OpsMan piece, when you want to encrypt that, that's just copying the AMI and using the encrypt with your KMS, and you're good. You can do it from the console, you can do it from the CLI. You want to go and encrypt your volumes that you're using as part of PaaS, that's part of the PaaS tile. You can go and just go and specify that you want that checked, and here's my key, go and use it. On top of that, what we have done is also applied 100% encryption to the entire tool plane. So we've gone and taken that and just kind of stretched it out a little bit. A little bit further along the path of getting towards the difficult aspects is if you want to go and encrypt those stem cells. You can use the Bosh repack command, which is somewhat challenging, but it allows you to achieve that functionality. And you can do this for other Bosh deployments as well. So you're just going to go and modify the cloud properties. You want to focus on the VM types, VM extensions, and the disk types. So there's an example of it. And you'll probably want to also reference the files differently. So instead of it going to a public access address, you're going to be using the file reference. When you're going through this, if you're just starting to go and encrypt your stem cells, you're going to want to go and make sure that you use different version numbers for those. If you don't, it can get a little squirrely if you need to pull one out and try to replace it. There's been some challenges with that, just something to be aware of as you go down your journey of encrypting the stem cells. Now for the areas that were really thorns in our side. When we were trying to begin the encryption process of those stem cells, the errors weren't necessarily handy. Maybe you find them very helpful. I didn't find them to be too helpful. We had to go through and we couldn't just use the star when trying to go and say, here are the policies we needed. We were able to establish which policies actually were truly required to get access to the key and to get access to the other aspects of the foundation. We've worked with Pivotal and we're actually able to update the documentation. So this should be something that's available at this point that you can just go and reference when you go and start to use that. As I mentioned previously, if you go to try to replace the stem cell, if you've had that issue, you can just use the upload fix. And on top of that, what we started to do is use a patch version number to go and try to differentiate some of the stem cells for that testing purpose, keeping them separate. Another routine that we found to be very beneficial is to create a custom validation routine. So this is something we did with Python using Boto. This allows you to go and not have to use the console, not have to use the CLI to go and try to aggregate the data to confirm that you have used the proper key with the instances and there aren't any outliers. And if there are, you can figure out which instances need to be addressed and which volumes need to be addressed. Going over to the multi-factor auth side, there's a lot of leverage that you can get out of the foundation itself. So if you want to go and have federated SAML, you can do that with your AppsMan, you can do that with your custom apps. When you do it with OpsMan, yes, you can switch over from internal auth to using SAML. There's a few things to be aware of. When you make that switch, if you don't have the XML exactly as you need it, you're going to possibly be locked out of the foundation. I know, I've done this. So there are ways to get out of it though. You can either try to modify something on the IDP side. You can also go in and manually decrypt some of the files, modify the YAML, re-encrypt them and push it back out there with being back on internal or modifying it to use the proper SAML assertions. Additionally, when you make the change so that OpsMan is no longer internal auth, but it's using the SAML piece, if you have any pipelines that are using OHM, which the majority of the pipelines that you're going to use will have OHM in it, it no longer uses the username and password fields. Rather, it's going to use the client ID and client secret fields with the username and password. So just something to think of and a good catch for going through and modifying your pipelines. And then lastly, when we were addressing the risk assessment portion, we put a process around this. It's similar to what people are going to try to do with the DevSecOps mindset. We had our IT security team, we had our operations team, and we had our development teams collaborate on a repository where they would go and capture the findings that they had from a different scan, whether it be just from an app scan, a network scan, some code scan. They would redact the information that isn't pertinent to go and learning. So you don't need to know the IPs. You don't need to go and know the system names. This is not a place to go and have a one-stop shop for hacking. It's to go and see what your trends are in there. So the next time an application comes through and they have a finding, they can go to this area and go and look to see what did some other teams do in our environment to go and address this. This is not something you're going to find on the internet necessarily, but how did it work within your walls? On top of that, it allowed for us to go and get visibility into areas that we may have weakness and that we need to go and educate our developers, educate our operators. Create a new template for your approach for going and actually stepping through and creating your foundation. And so we got some lift out of that. But we're at the end of this. So we hope that you thought this was a boom sauce worthy presentation. So here's our contact information. If you have any questions, we have a few minutes to go and take them. Otherwise, happy to go and talk with you afterwards.
Hope you all had a good conference.
Enjoy lunch.